if you practice be indecision for long enough, eventually you will identify yourself as indecisive. And once you identify yourself as indecisive, then you get really good at being indecisive. Same thing with, it goes both ways. So you practice being consistent, and eventually you go, damn, I'm really consistent. And now that you've identified yourself as such, you're going to get even better at being consistent. And this is where mindset is going, everybody. I'm calling it now. I've been talking about it for years. I'm watching it happen. Mindset, the conversation about mindset is going to the words. What words to use less of and why? What words to use more of and why? And when we add in the words, part of the conversation, now mindset becomes practical, as in you can practice thinking, writing, and speaking in better ways, and a whole lot of stuff is downstream from that.
Welcome back to the Medicine Podcast. My name is Mimi, and I am sitting next to my warrior, my king, my lover, Chase.
What's going on, everybody? We are pretty amped up today. We're talking to an OG in the space, an absolute legend. You may have heard him on other podcasts because he's been on a ton over the years. He's has some really incredible content out there on the interwebs, but we get him to ourselves today. So glad you are here, my friend, Mark England. Welcome to the Medicine Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Chase. Thank you, Mimi. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the audience for listening.
It's going to be good. All right. Well, let's get right into it. The first question that we ask every guest on the Medicine is, what do you love in your life? What aspect of your life do you love so much that you wish you could gift it to every human?
Oh, that's easy. It's what I do professionally. I've fallen in love. There have been taking a couple of beautiful women out of the conversation. I've fallen in love on site twice in my life. Once was the first time I took a jiu-jitsu class in 1996. I was a wrestler in high school, thought I was a tough guy, went into a jiu-jitsu class in college, and I got choked out, which is, turns out that's very different than getting pinned. And I was enamored. I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to learn this. Immediately hooked. And then the second time I fell in love on site was with the language game, the story game in 2003, when I saw a guy take a woman's story, and it was a legit stinger of a breakup. He took it and turned it on its head with one word in front of a group of people, and helped this woman walk out of a story that had been occupying way too much of her mental real estate for 4 years since the incident happened. Was getting in the way of her having a relationship. She just wasn't. She was still very, very bitter about the whole thing. And he changed one word in the story. Now, getting down to that one sentence and that one word, that there was some art there for sure. And he did that. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And here's the sentence. He did that to me. That was the sentence. He did that to me. And that was in 2003 on an island in the Gulf of Thailand, when I was at one of the lowest points in my life. I was a fighter, and I moved over to Thailand in 2002. The plan was to stay there for a year, practice my skills, come back and go pro. And that's not what happened. I jacked my knee up for a second time. The whole thing stopped. I turned into a grown ass man, baby. That's a technical term. And anyway, I fortunately stumbled across this place, this cleansing resort. And they were, I went and did some cleanses, and I went to an emotional detoxification, workshop while I was down there. And this work, thinking about our thinking, Alan Watts, one of my favorite teachers of all time, he said, when we learn to think about our thinking, we become alive in a new way. Most people are not thinking about their thinking. They're just thinking. And there's a profound difference. And so the art and science of helping people get their words working for them, most people's language is working against them. Oh, and I was a teacher before I got involved in this. I got a degree. I used to teach elementary school PE. So I'm a teacher to the core before a coach. I'm a teacher. And that's something that I love. I wake up every morning and there's gas in the tank to do this work. I've been doing it somewhere between full-time and overtime the whole time for the past 16 years. Where does the energy come from? Don't know, don't care. It's just one of those things, it's there, and I just say yes to it.
Hell yeah.
So the labor of love that you embody and get to do every day, that you get to engage in, is what I'm hearing you're saying that you wish you could gift to everyone, right?
Well, it's better than wishing that I could gift it to everyone. We do gift it to people.
Yeah.
When we get a chance to come on podcasts like this and talk about the power of our words and our stories, and what high level coaching is, what low level coaching looks and feels like, how to know what category of those two things that you're in, and help people empower their language and their stories and their mindset, because that's what mindset is. Lucky us, we've got a definition for that. Most people that talk about mindset, they don't have a definition for that. And if they do, it's usually this big, clunky philosophical thing that takes a while to explain, and then good luck implementing it.
Right.
Okay. Here it is. Our mindset, your mindset, everybody, it's the story you tell yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that is.
Yep.
It's the story you tell yourself, to yourself, about yourself, what you can do and what you can't do, and what is possible and what isn't possible, and what you do deserve and what you don't, and all these things that are not units of measurement. It's not like any of that stuff's on the periodic table of elements. They're opinions, and they drive the ship.
Right.
And so, I teach people about their words.
Hell yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. Let's I want to get in. There's so many little doors that have been cracked, and I want to get into them specifically around coaching and being a student and being a teacher. But first, a little context. What is Enlifted? What do you do today? And then you hinted at it a little bit as it pertains to your story and how you got there, but kind of the road, briefly, the road it took to get to that space where you are now with Enlifted.
Got it. I'm one of the co-founders of Enlifted. I'm the head coach of Enlifted. I deliver all of our trainings. I certify all of our coaches. And yesterday we graduated group 37 from level 1. There's 10 people per cohort. So there's 370 Enlifted level 1 students, roughly 180 level 2s, and a handful of level 3s. The path that I took to get here, a large part of that was out of personal need. Like I said, I moved to Thailand, and I went over there to fight, and jacked my knee up, second knee surgery, and darkness descended, and getting myself out of that entrenched dumpster fire of a victim mentality, which I'm very happy to recite the definition of for your listeners, because it's very valuable to hear most people have never heard the definition of the victim mentality. They've heard, the person's playing the victim, or they have a victim mentality. Having the verbatim definition of the victim mentality, when we add that into the conversation about mindset with some context, it adds a whole lot to the conversation. And so, getting myself out of that very unpleasant place, I was very uncomfortable in my skin for a variety of reasons. One of them being that the victim mentality, it is exceedingly stressful. And when someone's in a stress response, their breath is trapped in their chest. And if someone's breathing in their chest, where most people are, then it's somewhere between hard and impossible to be comfortable in your skin. Okay. Much less in a relationship with someone. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so that's been a personal process. And where I stand right now at 47 years old, I feel way better psychologically, emotionally, and even physically than I did when I was 27. And it comes down to, changing some words around and paying more attention to my breathing. It's not rocket science. Anybody can do it. And professionally, I'm a very blue collar person. I come from a blue collar background. And this is Enlifted is a blue collar personal and professional development. There's a couple ways to describe it. It's a school for sure. So we certify coaches, and we have a group, Mighty Networks group, and we have a ton of resources in there for essentially any aspect of coaching that someone wants to get into. There's either people in the community that are doing it, or there's resources provided on top of our trainings that help people do it. One of the big things we bring to the table in the conversation of coaching is that it's not coaching. Fine, we got to call it something, okay? Externally facing, so people know what it is, and we approach it as in transformational wordsmithing. That is an art.
Yeah,
that is art. That is a craft. It's a practice, and it's a path. And I approach this work as such. I am an artist. Okay, I'm an artist. I am a practitioner of this art when it comes to helping people change their stories, and also presentation skills. This is my 361st podcast I've been on, talking about this one thing.
Wow.
I'm very conservative number. I'm at 750 workshops on this one thing. We've got a killer TEDx talk that we crushed. 1,800 people, live streamed to 150,000. No pressure. So we like to get in front of people and tell good stories, because that helps people think better about their thinking. So yeah, coaching, it's not just coaching. Okay. And when someone approaches it as an art or a craft, they appreciate it better. They end up getting better at it. They have a longer, there's more longevity to their business, to their coaching business. And as important as anything, if not more, their clients get better results.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well put. One quick question: coaching and the umbrella underneath coaching, is this everything from like personal training for, exercise and nutrition, all the way to like mindset, maybe even business or something along those lines? Are there kind of subcategories of coaching that you guys break out?
Yeah, we can do a couple of different umbrellas. So what we specialize is in what most people would call mindset coaching. And the coaching conversation starts in Enlifted with the dismantling of the victim mentality, because that's where you're going to meet your client 98% of the time. Very rarely does someone book in for a coach when the sun is out. No, they're struggling with something. They're stuck somewhere. They need some help. They got a problem. And a vast majority of that time, the conversation starts, oh, hey, what can I help you with? And your client will tell you about a situation that they're dealing with. They'll talk about a problem that they're dealing with on a thematic general level in their adult life. And if you know what you're doing and you scratch the surface, you're going to get into specific events, and very, very likely you're going to get into specific traumatic events in their childhood and adolescence, because that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. A quick story about that. 2 nights ago, Gus, last night, Gus, on Tuesday Night Live, we do a live coaching class on Instagram. He was a 20-year coach, and he was riddled with imposter syndrome the whole time. And here's the short story. Here's how it went. Hey, Gus, tell me about that. And he told me about it generally speaking. Can you give me a specific example of that in your adult life? And he gave the example of, we won a championship one time and we were all partying. And I still felt like I didn't belong, and I didn't do enough. Okay. So I felt like an outsider, even though I was one of the coaches on this team. I couldn't celebrate what we had done. And it brought up this in his chest. And then I asked the second set of magic questions. When was the first time you ever felt that? And I didn't have to ask the second one. He just went straight to it, which was a time when his dad had to come pick him up, he and his brother, when he was 9 years old, take him away from his mother and an abusive stepdad. His mother was in pieces. And he had the story that I broke my mother's heart. And because he broke mother's heart, he was not a good son. And because he wasn't a good son, he couldn't be a good father. He couldn't be a good husband. He couldn't be a good coach. And it's nuts to think that people's imposter syndrome can be coming from way back there. And I'm here to tell people that it is. And the imposter syndrome and the victim mentality and atelophobia, the fear of not being good enough, those three things tank more coaching careers than anything out there combined. It's the real boogie monster for coaches. And that's one of the things that we help people, take up people, put in coaches do. Get in there, dismantle those stories, turn the volume down on them so they can become better at being seen. So when someone has a fear of being seen, they'll get real creative in ways to get in their way. Trust me, I've done it. I've got a black belt in that. And I have also, to a very real degree, we put out a ton of content and I'm at the center of it, got that under control majorly. So I know what it's like to be petrified of putting yourself out there in fear of judgment. And I also know what it's like to go on that many podcasts and workshops and be the centerpiece of this thing, the face of this thing for now, and put out 3 online courses and just go for it. Yeah. I know what that's like.
Yeah. Quick question on imposter syndrome, and this might not be actually a quick question or a quick answer, but I've heard other people, teachers in the space, of self-development, talk about this very real and relevant topic of imposter syndrome. It affects, I would say, probably the majority of people who are putting themselves out there in some capacity, myself included. Is there a degree of imposter syndrome that is ever healthy, productive, or helpful to your process of reflecting and not getting too full of yourself, that you feel like, oh, I have nothing, I'm good, I'm set, I am this person and I am the best, like a grandiose picture of yourself that might not be based in reality? Like, do you ever see any degree of imposter syndrome, or maybe it would be, another term, but is that ever helpful to someone's process of self-reflection?
Self-reflection is very important. Whether you're thinking about starting your coaching business, or you have started it, or you're 25 years in the game, could the imposter syndrome, to some degree, some flavor, help with that? Maybe. It depends on how conscious the person is of the story, how conscious of the person is of, why do I feel this way? What story am I telling myself? What words are put together? And instead of, this is the first time I've ever been asked this question. It's a great question. And the first thing that comes to mind is I'd rather have a very strong peer group than a flavor of my imposter syndrome for self-reflection. I mean, people around you that are not yes men, yes women, people that will tell you, hey, listen, you tighten this up over here. Okay. That's one of the major benefits of having a peer group or a community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's piggybacking on this, and that's a great answer to this question, because you've got, in my experience and having witnessed a host of different individuals, you've got one extreme where there's an incredibly talented human being. Let's say they're an artist, but they're bogged down by their own storytelling in a pessimistic, scarcity way, and they're sitting in their hermit archetype, creating or something that hasn't been shared yet to the world that should be. It could be this life-affirming gift to the world, but they're unable to break through that barrier of their own story that is sabotaging themselves. And then you've got the opposite extreme, which is you've got an 18-year-old who is now an Instagram coach, and they've given themselves their own certifications, and they live on an island somewhere, figuratively, and they're preaching something that's not based in experience, that is completely hyperbole, lacks any sort of grounded practicality, and potentially, but have 1 million followers and are potentially leading people astray. And so, like, maybe it's not your own self-limiting beliefs, because that's a toxic version of something, but there's a threshold of filtering oneself prior to partaking in the idea of being a coach. And maybe the answer is ensuring that you're consistently a part of a peer group that can hold you accountable to the claims that you might be making.
Yeah. Peer group is, so there's a trifecta of excellence. We talk about this in the Enlifted community towards the end of level 1 certification. 3 things you need. Okay, if you want to do this thing over time on a long enough timeline, so you can get good. It's fun to get good at stuff. And on an imposter syndrome note, to shore up some of that conversation that we started a little earlier, Mimi, a lot of what people, they mistake beginner syndrome for imposter syndrome. That's a tremendous distinction. If someone really noodles on that just that one thing, it's worth your time of listening to this podcast. There's a difference between imposter syndrome and beginner syndrome. Nobody's good at stuff when they first start doing it. I mean, of course, there's some varying levels of talent and stuff, and nobody masters something day 1. Nobody masters something day 12. I mean, I've seen, so to talk about, I'm self-certified. I've seen certifications out there that you can get a master practitioner in 12 days. I'm here to tell you, you can't. No, you can't. They're lying to you. You can't master something in 12 years. So I was up at the CrossFit Games 2 weekends ago, and I went up there to do a podcast, best hour of their day. Great guys, great audience. And they had a booth at the corner in the expo room, and they did 22 podcasts over 4 days. They're machines. And one of the guys, I forget his name, he had been an Olympic weightlifting coach for over 55 years.
Wow.
What do you right? What do you think that guy today would have said about him 12 years in? He would be like, dude, you're just starting to learn to see.
Right.
You're just starting to get that broad vision. And so if you're practicing something of significance, of substance, and you want to get good at it, give it at least 10 years. Give it a decade. Give it a decade. Oh my God, a decade. Yeah, a decade. One of our mentors said, you need to learn to think in decades. And I'll bet the farm that nobody listening to this podcast had any classes in high school about how to think in decades.
No, we think in, not to interrupt you, but like,
Oh, please do.
we think in, we meaning collective society. We think in 3 and 10 and 15 second, or maybe 30 seconds or 60 seconds or 90 seconds, what can fit in a reel on Instagram. That's what people are thinking in. It's like, give me the steps in 90 seconds so that I can save it to my Instagram, come back to this later and figure out how to become an expert in this thing. I don't think, I would say the large majority of people are not thinking in decades or teaching in decades. We're teaching in tiny segments that can catch the attention of someone who's scrolling. And it's just everything that you're saying, I absolutely agree with. And it's perfect. It's spot on. But it's so antithetical to what our culture is how we are currently engaging with information right now.
Yeah, it's very true. And so that 18-year-old that's got it all figured out, who has 1 million followers, claiming to have all the answers. Either they do or they don't. Let's just pretend they don't, because I remember 18. That wouldn't be imposter syndrome. That would be an imposter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be an imposter. And the person, the hermit, who's, and I know people like this, they're so good at what they do. They're top of the game, and they need just a little extra time to get it just perfect, and then they're going to be good enough. That's one of
when.
Exactly. There are so many pitfalls and tricks to the victim mentality, the imposter syndrome. I mean, to say that it's seductive is an understatement. Really, what's more seductive than our own voice in our own head? And, half the reason why, my favorite Instagram post right now or someone that I've been really going through it lately, and things have been really hard, and it's been really dark and really challenging, and I just want to let you know that, if you just believe in yourself and really just work on all the things you need to, and you just see it through, that you can make it. Here, look at my ass. It's like, they'll have these really like thought-felt, like deep, and then they'll show a picture of them in a thong on the bikini on Hawaii, and you think that has anything to do with them getting a million views? It does. Yeah. And to round that out, listen, everybody, give it the vibe check when you're paying attention to someone who's talking to you about transformation. Give them the vibe check. And if you get a good vibe, pay attention to that. And if you get a bad vibe, pay attention to that, because that's legitimate. That's a sensation. That's sensing. Senses, sixth sense. That's real feedback for you. And maybe the person is legitimate and the vibe test comes back negative for you. That just means it's a bad fit for you. Okay. So pay attention to how you feel about them. And if they're entertaining and they put out some good stuff from time to time, and you like how they look in a bikini, keep following them. Cool. Yeah, it's wild times. It's like when I first started, the social media was not, 16 years ago, it was like just getting my head around email.
Yeah, right. It's the wild, wild west right now. We just dropped an episode yesterday talking about, sex and technology ethics and the wild, wild west of how we all engage in technology and social media while also navigating dating and relationships and marriage, and how much is out there that is just like the third wheel of the relationship, which is technology. And it's also, this applies in every facet of life, in every aspect, whether it's coaching or self-development or whatever. It's like there's so much to look at and to potentially learn from, that I feel like it's really difficult to focus on one teacher, one mentor, one coach, a linear or a progressive way of learning from maybe one person in particular, whether it be a coach or a mentor, et cetera. And so I think we're just getting like decision fatigue almost, where we're like, we don't know where to look. There's so many shiny objects. How do I dig in and go deep with someone when there's so much to look at? And so I would love to hear from you about, your thoughts on the coaching world and all these different types of coaching, whether it be a self-love coach or a sex embodiment, femininity, divine, masculine. Like, I feel like I look at a new bio every day and there's a new coach for anything that you could ever want. What is your opinion on all of that? And how does one go about even like finding and working with a coach who has their chops, who has like real merit, real value to give to the person?
Great question. This is most of the podcasts I go on, and I know that going in, and I'm excited to share the stories. Hey, how'd you get into this? That's how we start, and then I, tell the stories. And so these are new and welcome questions. I'll begin my answer to that with more of my coaching story. My mother, she died when I was 20. When I was 33, so I started coaching. I'm 47 now. I started coaching when I was 30. When I was 33, I got access, and it came in a couple of chapters, a couple of checks, access to roughly $250,000. And I'm really glad I got it then. Really, really glad I got it then instead of 23. We wouldn't be having this conversation. 33, I get access to, for me, it was a large sum of money. And I'd been coaching for 3 years full time, studying the art for 7. And I knew some of the things were out there. And and about 18 months later, I leave where I had been living. So I lived in Thailand for 10 years. It still sounds strange to say that. First half, I was in Bangkok as a sports teacher, elementary school sports teacher. The second half, I was a counselor, coach at that same cleansing resort on Koh Samoyan Island. And I left and I took that money and I traveled around the world numerous times. I got to 8 of the 9 founders of the systems that I knew of. And there's great stuff out there that I'm ignorant to. And out of the systems that I knew of that were most impressive to me, I went and studied with 8 of the 9 founders. And I would pick a training and I would go there early, do the training, do one-on-one sessions with that person and stay after and immerse myself in the community. I didn't know why I was doing what I was doing. I just knew that that was the right thing to do. So part of my answer to that question, Mimi, which is really a great question, it's the vibe test. It's the vibe test. And on a side note, who gets paid more? Who gets paid more? As far as doctors are concerned, the general practitioner or the neurosurgeon, the specialist? At some point in time, folks, you're going to need to pick a lane. You're going to need to pick a lane at what you study with someone who's, again, got experience. They've been in the game a while. They're doing what you want to do. I also recommend picking someone who's fun and entertaining because that's a major part of the learning process. Okay. And go as deep as you can or want to with that person, because here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to be this person, which I've consulted with. I've seen these people. And just one person comes to mind. I got hired to an audit a coach's offering. And I'm serious when I say this. They had 21 things that they did. They had 21 different things they did, from tarot card reading to soul retrieval to family constellation to chakra balancing to Swedish massage to shiatsu massage to foot massage, like all, and then a bunch of other stuff, angel sessions. And you had to check the box of whatever you wanted. Talk about decision fatigue in sales. It's called the paradox of choice. So the more choices, a confused buyer says no every time. The more choices someone has when it comes to working with people, the less likely they are to make a decision. And then it came to payment. There was another section, and you could pay 5 payments of once you tallied up all the stuff, 5 payments of $555.55. So they had all these sacred numbers in there. Oh, yeah. And she was a friend too. I was like, sweetheart, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. Jack of all trades, master of none. So my advice is to, in the early stages of your exploration, unless you strike gold, and you'll know it if you feel it, when it comes to studying with someone, do some R&D. Do some research and development. And that's one of the things that I was doing. I went out and studied with 8 of the 9. Let's see if I can recount them all. So Gary Craig from Emotional Freedom Technique, Richard Bandler from Neuro-Linguistic Programming, Bob Stevens from Conscious Language, Leonard Orr from Rebirthing, Bert Hellinger from Family Constellations, Steve Richards from Holographic Kinetics. That's 6. I know who I didn't make it to. I didn't make it to Mind Power with John Kehoe. And there were 2 other people. So another part of my answer is show up in person. What is the person you're studying like in person? That'll tell you a whole lot, because you can get some of it through one of these, and show up and see what the other coaches are like. You'll learn a lot about a coaching system through the coaches community. Sure. That's some other inside baseball. So yeah, that's part of my answer. Don't be a jack of all trades, folks. Negation acknowledged. Pick a lane and
Well, and it seems like even if you have this wide cornucopia, this beautiful array of different skills, you don't have to showcase them on your website. You can choose a niche or something and then know that you have all of these tools in your tool belt if the person in front of you requires that, rather than making the person choose the modality of healing when they might not even know what family constellations mean. So I do want to throw that in there where it's like, yeah, be good at a bunch of things if you want to. But you don't have to list them for someone else to choose.
And what I'm hearing some takeaways here is you've got an expertise. You may have a broad wealth of knowledge, but you've got an expertise and you're hyper focused on that expertise. You have experience. You've got years of experience, a diverse set of experiences, and you've had mentorship from masters, and not just one. Maybe it's multiple masters, and you've spent time as the student. And I think those are critical. Instead of just how many followers does this person have? How sexy is their website? What's their sales funnel look like? And if I scroll down on their Instagram, how appealing to my eyesight is their aesthetic.
Yeah.
Huge, critical. From the student perspective, oftentimes there's an eventual interest in transitioning into the coach or the mentor. And I think that can be quite romanticized and become enticing, especially in the world that we live in, where you see folks who are able to step in and embody the coach and are quite successful at it. We've even had listeners. We're not coaches. We don't proclaim to be coaches, but we've had listeners and folks from our community, come out and say like, hey, I'm so inspired to be better. I love this personal development space. I'm going to become a coach. Where do I start? How do I evaluate the proper programs? So from the lens of maybe the listener, the student, someone who feels this call to be a coach, how would you advise they check themselves before they wreck themselves pertaining to whether or not they should be a coach? What are some things that they should be looking for within themselves that might suggest they will make a great coach?
What kind of coaching? What are they interested in? I don't know of one great coach that is not interested in the thing that they're coaching. So one, where are their interests? And it could be in physical fitness. Okay. Are you passionate about it? It's very hard to hide passion and interest and excitement. Why would you? Okay. So pay attention to what lights you up. Pay attention to what you're attracted to, because that is some very powerful feedback. And now that I'm talking this thing out, that could be the number one piece of feedback, because attraction is not a choice. It's not a choice. Good luck talking yourself into being attracted to somebody. Good luck talking yourself out of being attracted to somebody. And it's the same thing with modalities. So I have a martial arts background, and there's a lot of parallels between martial arts and healing arts. Okay. What martial arts are you most attracted to? Okay. Those are usually, that's a very good barometer of what you should go and study. And then another thing that comes to mind, if you're looking to be in the transformation space, very frequently, that's an understatement, that's going to entail helping people with their stories and emotions, and getting clear about how much of that, if at all, you want to participate in is important as well. So 65% of our coaches come from the fitness space, and I've done at least 35 workshops in CrossFit gyms. And some of the people in the CrossFit space, the CrossFit coaches, fitness coaches, they take one look at what we're doing, as in, hey, pick up a pen and write down that story that's been haunting you for God knows how long, and we're going to go into it. The emotions and feels are going to come up. We're going to get the breath in there, and we're going to get you through it. There's no such thing as getting over something. You got to go into it. You got to go through it. None of this stuff is new. This is all old school, like really ancient stuff. Joseph Campbell said it. He said, any feeling felt all the way through is bliss. And so anyway, Some coaches take a look at what we're doing. They're like, I want nothing to do with that.
Right.
I want nothing to do with that. Give me my macros, give me my eating meal plans and my workouts, and I'm good to go. And you know what I say? I say, I understand. And I mean that. Some coaches look at what we're doing and they say, yeah, I do want to work with people at that level. And I say the exact same thing in the exact same way. I understand. And so pay attention to what you're attracted to and go find somebody who's really good at it. Go find somebody who's really good at it and you vibe with those. That's a good, and then look at their students, because you can absolutely gauge the quality of a teacher. There's two levels to this, in my personal and professional opinion. You can gauge the quality of a teacher on the quality of their students. That's level one. And then level two is you can gauge the quality of a teacher on the quality of their students. Once it gets past the students, it's out of your hands. So for me personally, I'm going to do this work for 50 years. I'm 16 years in. And like I said, we graduated group 37 yesterday. I'm going to do the first 100 level 1 certifications. At this pace, I've got 6.5 years till that's done. And when that's done, I'm going to take a look at who's around, who's in the community, who's been busy, who's gotten their experience, who's got the natural talent, and most importantly, who wants to do it, because coaches choose themselves. And then from there, I'm going to support our coaches that want to train. They want to certify. And I will be watching their students, and then, but yeah. So I said it.
You'll treat you by its fruits, right? Correct. That's the Bible said that, folks, and it's true. We will reap what we sow. You will know it. You will know a teacher by their students. You will know a tree by its fruits. And this whole thing, let's get abracadabra on the table too. This whole conversation about the power of our words and stories, it's ancient. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say abracadabra, what do you all immediately think of?
Magic.
A magic spell.
Magic. Everybody does. In 2000, so I lived in Thailand for a decade. I also lived in Ecuador for about 18 months. And I'm out to dinner in 2013 with some friends. And there's a guy who knew what I was into. And he goes, hey, man, you know what abracadabra means? I'm like, yeah, magic. And he goes, no, it's way cooler than that. He said, abracadabra, you can look this up, is Aramaic, which you might have heard this. And it translates, it's an ancient language. And it translates to with my word I create, or with my word I influence. And they would triangulate it and wear it around their neck to remind them of the power and the mechanism of the spoken word. Shout out to William Arthur Jewelry. He's my jeweler. Yeah, he made me a custom abracadabra piece. And Richard, Russell Brand, he just bought one of these. Not the same piece, but he bought an abracadabra. The word about the words is getting out. That's fun.
Yeah,
that's so cool. That's so cool that you created that, or that he created that for you as a reminder. And it's I had heard that before about abracadabra, and it's probably said completely differently in Aramaic, but I studied a little bit of Aramaic for a time a few years ago, and it was really interesting to see how that culture, that language, that way of interacting with sounds and vibration was in a creative and picturesque way. And the Lord's Prayer, like I was able to study the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic, and it's not even close to how we think of words in English, in westernized English. It's a completely different way of creating imagery with your words. And that was one thing that really stood out to me about Aramaic. And I'm going off on a tangent here, but it's just interesting because that's where we get a lot of these sayings and parables from the Bible, from Jesus. Well, guess what, folks? Jesus spoke Aramaic, and he thought in pictures and creative ways that it's really hard for us as westernized English-speaking Americans to even like fully wrap our mind around. And it was just so fascinating when I studied the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic, and I was like, this is completely different than what I recited in school and church for all of my life. This is an interaction. This is a relationship. This is like one phrase, one word can mean 10 different things. And it just depends on the context of what you're creating. Anyways, I'm total tangent, but just speaking to the creation is like, we can't even fully wrap our minds around it.
I'm right there with you, sis. We're under the spell of modern English. I'm going to say that again. We're under the spell of modern English. The definition of a spell, Webster's, not mine, is a word or a combination of words of great influence. And one of my buddies in Thailand, he was an Ayurvedic doctor. He said something once off the cuff, and I just it snapped me to attention. And he said the English language is a slave language.
Mm.
The English language is a slave language. And I didn't ask him anything more about that. Some part of me knew that you need to stare at that. You need to contemplate it, because there's 3 levels of thought. There's thinking. That's when you do it once. There's considering. That's when you do it a few times. And then there's contemplation. That's when you stare at a thing until it reveals its secrets to you. And the way that the English language is used almost exclusively today, it is externalized, it is vague, and it is inflammatory. She never lets me live my life. Okay? That's externalized. She, victim, villain, mental imagery right there all day long. I'm in the picture. She's in the picture. She's doing something to me. She's not even around. That could have been, I see her once a month or whatever. Maybe whatever. And it inflames the imagination, traps the breath in the chest, creates excess rigidity in the body. Technically, it's called amygdala hijack, and it turns us into zombies of sorts, because when someone goes into a stress response, now this is the mechanics of storytelling, when we're in a stress state and the breath is in the chest, we get fixated on something. We get fixated on an idea, a picture, okay? Our listening skills tank. It's like we've all had or tried to have a conversation with someone who's very emotional. It's like talking to a brick wall, because they literally can't hear us. The stronger the emotional charge, the higher the breath gets in the chest, the less ability someone has to listen, and we also lose access to our creative faculties. So if you want to trick a group of people and get them to do things that you want them to do, scare them. Mm-hmm. And better yet, get them to scare themselves. So if you give them and the language is an inheritance, everybody. We've inherited this thing, this tool to tell ourselves a story about ourselves. And there is a way, we teach this way, to use the English language to create space and clarity, to down-regulate the nervous system, to become more accurate with our language. And when I mean language, I mean internal dialogue and external dialogue. What we think, what we say, what we write, that's your language. And to become more self-reflective in that process. And we've got a built-in something in us that when we get positive reinforcement when we go from he's wasting my time to I'm wasting my time. Yeah, that's going to piss me off for a hot second, but then I go, oh, wait, well, then I can change. And then I go, and then the air comes out and I'm like, okay, yay, I feel better. So there's some part of our evolutionary biology that rewards us for becoming more responsible with our storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So many of us are afraid to fail, and we're afraid to be criticized. And we live in a world where if you have any public platform, which many do because they're on social media, you're just nitpicked left and right. And that fear of failure even suggests that we can lean into that externalization, that blame of somebody else, blame of my environment, as a way to separate ourselves from the responsibility and or the potential of quote unquote failing or being criticized. And so in my own life, we got divorced earlier in our relationship. I had worked in a very intense environment in a public finance firm for 5-6 years. I had so many opportunities for my own misery to externalize them. I literally had a bouquet of reasons to justify why I wasn't well, why I wasn't happy, why I wasn't fulfilling the opportunities that were in front of me to the degree that I would have liked. And it wasn't until I, found myself in a personal development, self-development type community where they essentially started putting it into my face, like, yo, you're responsible for any and all of this. Mm-hmm. Stop shooting yourself. There's opportunity to take responsibility for your own life. And then you have the control, you have the ability to start pushing through these obstacles and actually experience growth and evolution. And it's so wildly powerful when you start. For instance, one of these practices that I partook in was taking inventory of your thoughts, and quite literally just a positive thought or a negative thought, being conscious for one day on the amount of positive or negative thoughts that are running through your conscious mind. And to take inventory of those for me at that point in time was literally a 100x negative, pessimistic, skeptical, cynic version of myself, and that had notes galore. And I eventually gave up. I couldn't even do it by the end of the day, versus the positive ones, just trumped the positive ones. And similarly, I wrote what was a fuck you letter, and it came out like just liquid. How easily I could write a fuck you letter to myself. And then an opposite of that is a I fucking love you letter, where I'm highlighting all of my positive attributes. And it was like pulling teeth. It was so difficult. And I was so afraid to put anything down because God forbid I fuck one of these up. And if I'm saying I'm good at something, but if I fail tomorrow, Jesus Christ, that makes it even worse. And so like this was 10 years ago, a little less than that. But once you are aware of the amount of negative or pessimistic thoughts that are running through your body at all times, you start to see and feel how those words are building this little portal that you step through and experience your entire world through. And the power of those words are quite literally crafting your reality. It's painting the filter with which you see life through. And until you really sit back and start to believe and experience this idea that our words are the code with which we operate our lives through, you just unconsciously walk through life and fingers crossed, hope that through happenstance, things go your way.
Oh, yeah. I like that. A bouquet of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
A bouquet of reasons.
What are you suggesting folks in your coaching practice and with your coaches? How do they start to become aware? And awareness is the first step before, consciously integrating something, but become aware of their stories.
Glad you asked. First things first, definition of the victim mentality. Let's do that.
Let's do it.
Because then that sets the stage for where to start with your words. So most people, if you got a pen, everybody, and a piece of paper, grab it. Most people have never heard the definition of the victim mentality, much less written it down. And here are the numbers, 30, 50, 80. We remember 30% of what we hear, 50% of what we write, 80% of what we turn around and teach or share. So if you put pen to paper, you're now in an extremely exclusive club of people that have written down the definition of the victim mentality, and you'll get more for your time. So I'll do this twice. First time, slow. I'm going to take a pinch out of the middle. This is the verbatim definition of the victim mentality. Second time, I'll speed it up, give it some context, and then tell everybody where to start because it's easy. The victim mentality is an acquired personality trait where a person tends to regard himself or herself as the victim of the negative actions of others, even in the absence of clear evidence. The victim mentality depends on a habitual thought process and attributions. That's the definition of the victim mentality. Second time, a little faster. with some polish. The victim mentality is an acquired personality trait where a person tends, it's a tendency, folks. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. A person tends to regard himself or herself as the victim of the negative actions of others, even in the absence of clear evidence. Yep, we'll make shit up if we have to. Yep. Second sentence, the victim mentality depends, underline that word, on a habitual, circle that word, thought process and attributions. That second sentence is right between the eyes, right where it belongs. The victim mentality depends, as in it has to have a habitual, which accurately implies duration and addiction, thought process. What's a thought process? Glad you asked. It's how you put your words together. We all have one. And then attributions. What's an attribution? It's a characteristic. The main characteristic that we focus on is besides the words, is breathing. We're known as the language people. Sweet. It's nice to be known for something. We might as well be known as the language and the breathing people. And push comes to shove, it's about the breath. Okay, we're here to help people unlock their breath and give themselves space and clarity in their life. And I can also, if we have time, a little bit in a hot second, circle back into a couple of the key differences between an amateur and a professional coach. Okay, and so based on that definition of the victim mentality, the habitual thought process, there's in the Enlifted method, there's 3 pillars of what we call conflict language. Okay, which account for roughly 85% of the language patterns, the words that people use to script the victim mentality, whether they like it or not. I don't care how over you are feeling like a victim of something or other, as long as you put the words together, he did that to me, you're getting the victim villain mental imagery. It doesn't matter how sick you are of it, because 2 + 2 = 4. So where do people start? Soft talk. So the three pillars are projections. You are ruining my life. They are wasting my time. Dad treats me like a child. You start taking out the dads and the theys and the she's and the he's and people's first name and putting in I's. Part of you is going to hate it. Okay. That the projections, that's where the bitterness is.
Yeah.
Okay. That's where the strongest emotions are. And then there's negations. I won't make that mistake again. I can't spend all my money this weekend. I can't keep living like this. And so it forces us to make it puts the can'ts, won'ts, isn'ts, nots, haven't, shouldn'ts, don'ts. It forces us to put the things we don't want on our internal vision board, also known as our imagination. And, it takes some time to get your head around that, whatever. And then there's soft talk. I think I might be drinking too much coffee. It's almost like I'm procrastinating. I guess I'm avoiding that person. What am I doing there?
You're diluting the problem.
Correct. And
you're kind of diluting the problem.
Yeah.
Kind of sort of diluting the problem and keeping it just in outside at finger's length, so I don't have to make a decision, so I don't have to make some change. And this is called soft talk. There's only a handful of soft talk keywords. I'm about to rattle them off, and this is where you start the conversation, because it's so easy. These are more annoying than anything else, and it's so easy just to take the guess. I think we probably should go do, and then you're like, no, wait a minute, take out the probably and the should. No, we're going to go do. Okay. Or I'm going to go do. And you start talking yourself into stuff, and you start building momentum, and things get more interesting, and you sound different. And people, if you're in a position of leadership or want to get in a position of leadership, if you got a whole bunch of these words in your words, then it's hard to be inspiring like that. That's an understatement. So if you got a pen and a piece of paper, everybody, and you can get we have a 7-day soft talk challenge, it's free, www.enlifted.me/soft talk. Okay.
This is dating advice also.
I was going to say,
guys listening,
everything that you're saying is helping someone, assisting someone in increasing or amplifying their masculine energy, which is purpose driven. It's cutting, it's action oriented. And if a guy is having and this works for women as well, but if a guy's having issues with, oh man, I just,
friend zoned
everywhere. You're probably soft talking a lot.
You are soft talking a lot.
Well,
good cat. And I almost did this. I almost did it. I almost used the example. Since it's y'all and y'all, yeah. So, hey, fellas, go ask a girl out on a date and go, do you think you might want to maybe go out on a date with me sometime? Say it just like that. Let me know what your close rate is, as opposed to look at the difference. Exactly. What kind of energy does that create in you, Mimi?
It doesn't make me feel safe. It makes me feel like, are you trying to make me convince you to, like, are you sure that that's what you want to do? It doesn't sound like you're sure you want to go on a date with me.
As opposed to, I want to go on a date with you. What are you doing Saturday night? You get clearer with your language. You get more conscious and constructive with your language, and your breathing is going to unlock. And since we're talking about going on dates, that's a big deal. Go on a first date and hold your breath, because your language and your story is out of control in your head, and see how comfortable everybody else feels. Trust me, women pick up on that. Yeah. Go out on and by the way, you're going to be a bad listener. You're probably going to end up talking too much, and because that's stress response, breath in the chest. Bad listening. Go on a date, breathe well, watch what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Good breathe. We have a saying in the coaching and Enlifted coaching community. Good breathing equals good coaching, because good breathing equals good listening, and good listening equals good coaching. So good breathing equals good coaching.
Good
so
breathing,
here they are.
It's like good living.
Yeah. For sure. All around. I mean, sex life, the whole thing. Because you can plug all kinds of stuff into, hey, your breath is stuck in your chest. I have social anxiety disorder. Oh, you mean your breath is trapped in the chest? I get nervous when people question me. Oh, your breath is trapped in your chest. When I give a presentation, I forget where what I'm talking about. Oh, your breath is trapped in chest. Look at this. I suffer from premature ejaculation. Oh, you mean your breath is trapped in your chest? Yeah. And when people that might sell everybody on this thing. You correlate the dudes and the girls. They're like, hey, buddy, work on your story. You correlate your words, certain words, to breath trapped in your chest, to premature ejaculation, to not having a good sex life. Then that's highly motivating. Just start changing your words. I used to do that. I was so in my head in my 20s about sex, and so my breath was trapped in my chest. And what do you think happened? It was like, most of the time. And it's half the time. And then as I got into my stories and started dismantling these victim centricities, and my breathing unlocked and descended down to my chest and then into my abdomen, and now I'm in a parasympathetic nervous system response when I'm having sex. It's a completely different ball game. Where do we start? Soft talk. I'm going to read these out. Get your pen. Get a paper. Here they are in all their glory. Probably, perhaps, feels like, guess, maybe, could, might, possibly, sort of, kind of, potentially, hopefully, try, one day, should, almost like. It's almost like I'm gonna get over all these insecurities. If those words are in your language, you're going to struggle to move things forward. And and it goes both ways with identity, everybody. If you practice indecision, as if you use those words, you're going to create indecision. If you practice be indecision for long enough, eventually you will identify yourself as indecisive. And once you identify yourself as indecisive, then you get really good at being indecisive. Same thing with, it goes both ways. So you practice being consistent, and eventually you go, damn, I'm really consistent. And now that you've identified yourself as such, you're going to get even better at being consistent. And this is where mindset is going, everybody. I'm calling it now. I've been talking about it for years. I'm watching it happen. Mindset, the conversation about mindset is going to the words. What words to use less of and why? What words to use more of and why? And when we add in the words, part of the conversation, now mindset becomes practical, as in you can practice thinking, writing, and speaking in better ways, and a whole lot of stuff is downstream from that. So is this a good time? I know I go on rants and tangents professionally. Is this a good time to talk about pro and amateurs for coaching?
Yeah.
Yep.
There's more to this conversation, and these are very valuable things to consider or contemplate, depending on what level of thinker you are. Answers push, questions pull. Answers push, everybody. Questions pull. And for the first couple of years of my coaching, I thought I had to have all the answers. I thought I had to have all the answers to all my clients' problems, which if you scratch the surface of that, that means I've got to be smarter and more wise than all of my clients about everything.
Yeah.
And so then it gets really convoluted and codependent. Then I need them to believe me. I need them to agree with me. And if they don't agree with me, then what are they paying me for? And it gets worse. If I have to have all the answers for them, then that means I have to have all the answers for me. And nobody has all the answers for them, because if they did, their life would be picture perfect. And then, wait a minute, my life isn't picture perfect, but I have to have all the answers for me because I have all the answers for them. Whoa. And then the imposter syndrome is just waiting to jump out from behind a dumpster and mug you because you're not that thing that you claim to be, as in, I have all the right answers. 1-800 hotline. I got all the right answers, coach. Okay. Mm-hmm. That is a very stressful place to be. And if you do that, you're going to feel like an imposter. And, we've already talked about what happens when the imposter syndrome shows up and stays there. It gets coaches out of the game. And one of the things that we're here to do is to help coaches stay in the game and get good and do the two things that are most important when it comes to coaching, as in being a professional coach. You've got to create an impact with your clients. You have got to deliver transformation, and you have to make money. If you only haven't make an impact, then you've got a hobby. If you're making an impact and there's no money there, you're not making money, then you've got a hobby. If you're only making money and you're not an impact, then that's going to be a very lonely island to live on, and you're not going to enjoy that version either. You put those two things together. You're paying the bills, you're making the money that you want, and you're having the impact that you want with your clients and your community. Then that is the sweet spot. Okay. And so let's go back to questions and answers. So answers push, questions pull. We're going to talk about three things between professionals and amateurs when it comes to coaching. The best coaches in the world ask good questions. Your quality of questions is indicative of the quality of your coaching. Answers push, questions pull. Here's another way of saying it. Answers, I tell them. Questions, they tell them. Your client has the answers, and your job is to pull that out. And if you want to, I'm serious when I say this, if you want to 100x the power of your questions, marry good, simple questions with low and slow breathing, as in breathing down in your abdomen, because that is the demonstration of you being non-attached to the answer that comes out of them. And you combine a good question, with I don't care what comes out of you. That's that whole no can defend stuff. Breath trapped in the chest, I'm attached, whether I want to admit it or not, to the answer, to the outcome, to the whole thing. Breath trapped in the chest, that's the demonstration of attachment. Breath low and slow, good coaches are good breathers. You're breathing. So the first thing is know the difference between questions and answers. There's a huge difference. Second thing is breathe well, breathe low and slow when you're coaching, especially if you're going into stories of an emotional nature, because one, that'll set the rhythm. It'll set it'll set the container, to use some more modern language, and it will also allow the person. So you're making, when you're breathing in your abdomen, you're making whatever they're about to say okay before they say it, and you'll be shocked at what people get out of them. Okay, breath trapped in the chest. People pick up on that in coaching and dating. And when you're breathing well, combine that. So the third thing is don't believe your clients. Don't believe them. That sounds cold at first until we unpack it. Do not believe your clients, because if you believe your clients, it's called drama bonding. And if you do that strong enough, then you get into trauma bonding. So instead of believing your client's story that they want to change, by the way, observe your client's story. Observe your client's story. What does that mean? When you observe your client's story as opposed to believing it, you believe your client's story, your breath is going to get up here and you get sucked in, and then the whole thing gets convoluted and messy. When you observe your client's story, then you're able to track the big five. Here's the big five, the words your clients are using. If you're believing your client's story, you're not tracking the words, you're sucked into the drama. The words they're using, their rate of speech. Your client's rate of speech it's very important to track. Here's a good rule of thumb. It's better than a good rule of thumb. It's a phenomenal rule of thumb. The faster your client's story goes, the harder it is to change. The faster the story goes, the more the breath is in the chest. Good luck changing a fast story with the breath in the chest and no words written down on paper. Have fun with that. So you get to track the words, you get to track the rate of speech, you get to track the inflection. Super important. You get to track their body language. What are they doing with their hands, and then the breath. And so when your client gets in, and by the way, if they're paying you to help them change their story, why would I believe the story they're telling me now when 30 minutes from now they're going to have a different story because I'm going to help them change it? Why would I go ahead and believe that now?
Yeah.
No, this is just where we're at. You put, and again, there's plenty more to this conversation, and that right there is coaching gold, folks.
That is really, really powerful. Really, really excellent. I'm there is going. It could be emotional, right? This client could have an emotional story, and it's one thing to sit there and hold space, to use a term that's just everywhere, but real. To hold space and validate the emotional experience that they've had, that they're telling you about or are having in the process of telling. That's different than literally interpreting every single word they have to say as the true story. And that's what I'm seeing, is like looking deeper beyond the literal words that are coming out of their mouth, knowing that the emotions can be held and contained, but working past that wall, that projection of what's happened to them, and finding the source for some level of, maybe that's questioning, but pulling them into the potential answer that they'll experience themselves is what I'm hearing. And that's really, really powerful stuff. And
one thing that I wanted to highlight too, because you said it pretty quickly, but I think it's the foundation of all real self-development. You said, if you're giving someone the answer, you're telling them. If you're giving them a question or proposing a question, they tell them, which we've talked about that concept in different words 100 times on the podcast, where it's like, it's about real self-development is the person taking ownership of their experience. And we can tell, friends and family, like, oh, you're having this problem. Well, here's what you should do. And yeah, we may be right, but it's not going to land. It's not going to stick. It's not going to have any impact until they take ownership of that. And they either ask you for help, or they are able to tell themselves through questioning, like, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? How would your life be different if they tell themselves and it lands differently in their body than someone speaking at them?
You wonder why the traditional education system doesn't work well. We've got people telling you the answers, memorize the answers, don't experience it for yourself. We've got education, mainstream politics, pseudo leadership, pseudo science authorities out there telling you all of the answers. No wonder we haven't learned a damn thing. It's because we've never come to the conclusions ourselves.
There are mega industries, everybody, built off of the back of the collective victim mentality. And in my personal and professional opinion, the way to dismantle that thing is through our own story first, and then being in a community of people that are doing the same for them. Unlocking what would happen? We got 8 billion people, give or take, walking around, and most people are breathing terribly.
Right.
What is the universe? Listen, man. Make sure you know who you're listening to. Everybody here. I'm an elementary school PE teacher. I have a handful of MMA fights. I've got an IQ of 12. Okay, and in my simple world, the universe is a feedback loop. And whatever 8 billion people are projecting to it, it's going to give us that back collectively. And that takes the whole conversation about people get the government they deserve to a different level of responsibility. How about people get the villain they create?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Work on the micro and it works on the macro. And if it works on both, then it's worth considering.
Yeah.
Contemplate.
Yeah. Yeah. It's everything that you said is spot on, and it's reflective of things that we talk about all the time. I love how you're able to kind of package it in a way that people can absorb.
Yeah. So moving a little bit into, because I know there's 2 sets of people that are listening to this right now that are likely going to take action from this episode, and I want to point them in the right direction. We're going to have some, I'm sure, who are interested in becoming coaches and going through the Enlifted protocols and programs to become a coach. And then we're going to have some folks going, I want to work with somebody who is a coach under this platform and who's been through this system. Can you speak to and direction orient the 2 of these listeners that are likely interested in taking action from here?
Super easy and glad to. For the people that are interested in learning more about the Enlifted certifications, go to enlifted.me. That's our website. That's everything you need to know. If you want to work with an Enlifted coach, to go into the stories, and it's there's going to be some heavy lifting. There will be emotions felt. Promise. Go to @Enlifted Coaches and say that you heard us on the Medicine podcast and that you'd like to work with a coach. We'll ask you some questions. And Perry, we got 370 coaches. We got coaches for men, women. We got a singing coach. You got whatever it is, we'll ask you some questions and find somebody in our community is a very good fit for you. And we enjoy doing that a lot.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and we'll get those links from you, and we'll put them in the show notes, you guys. So check there for direct access. So the @Enlifted Coaches was on Instagram, correct?
Correct. Yes, that's on Instagram, and I'll send this to you once we're done. This thing's now famous. The Enlifted Soft Talk Challenge. All
right.
Do it. You get 7 days. It'll help you with the thinks and the maybes and the buts, and life gets better when you take them out.
Yeah. I want to do it. We're gonna do the 7-day soft talk challenge, and
we'll do it.
We will do it. I said we're going to.
Okay, great.
We're gonna be correcting each other like soft talk. It's like, well, we're going to. We're gonna do. We are doing it. We already are.
Okay. Hell yeah. Let's go.
Thank you so much for being here. Is there any other closing words, any final thoughts that you want to leave our listener before we ask you our final question of the podcast?
There is one thing that I feel. Let me touch my heart real quick. That I feel very called to talk about. What's your favorite Ryan Sprague story?
Actually, I off the top of my head, I totally know it. We were at an event with Ryan here in San Diego area, and it was actually in the Temecula area, so I'm like an hour away from our home. And Ryan brings some of his alchemical and magical cannabis to the event, and I'm a cannabis consumer myself, and I partake. It's fine, totally. I can completely handle this.
Passing around a bag for about
a volcano bag,
couple hours.
Tahiti lime.
What's that?
Tahiti lime.
I have no idea what it was. And I partake, and I should not have drove necessarily, but I felt okay. I felt really great, very engaged. I wasn't checked out by any means, but we drive home. We have the most productive conversation ever. It's really beautiful, and we get home. Continue out through the night, maybe in an hour or two, fall asleep, go to bed, wake up in the morning, and my whoop band, which I was wearing, had registered my sleep at 16 hours, because when I took a hit of Ryan Sprague's cannabis, my body went into such a parasympathetic state that it believed me to be sleeping. And so I had the best night's sleep ever recorded on the Whoop Band history, with 16 hours and beautiful rest and restoration, HRV through the roof. I've given him that information in case he wants to use it for any sort of promotional material. But that one is definitely up there.
I was about to ask, does he know this? Ryan's he's one of our level 3 coaches. He's one of the funniest people that I've ever met. So we're on the family farm right now. I'm at the family farm right now. We're on about 120 acres. And 2 weekends ago, we had 35 people out here for my 47th birthday party. And we all camped out. It's just so much fun.
When's your birthday?
July 29th.
Oh, you said 2 weekends ago. I thought maybe we were closer. Mine's August 7th, but continue.
It's close enough. Ryan was here. Rachel was here. They brought their dog, Pierre. And 4 or 5 times he's come down to our family's lake house when we just pack it full of our favorite people. And the stories, have you ever done one lung breathing with him? So you get in a group of people, and so they'll smoke the stuff, and then it just, one story comes to mind. These stories are, I'm going to do it anyway. And I understand that a secondhand story isn't that funny. If you know Ryan Sprague, it's hilarious. We were sitting there, and he was telling this story about this body worker that came in to do sessions with all of him and his mom and all these people. And he was just, this guy was really profound. And Ryan is Ryan. And he said he was working on him, and he goes, the body worker goes, don't be sad for people that have passed on. They're living their life from beyond the veil. And Ryan goes, I thought about it for a second, and I just go, stick. It was just this answer it was like something out of Bill and Ted's. So it was this golden nugget from the Dalai Lama, and his answer was sick. We love him. Ryan Sprague, we love you.
He is a golden retriever embodied in a human vehicle.
That is a perfect way to say it. Check the guy out, everybody. Highly optimized. This Once Upon a Time on psychedelics.
He's a medicine podcast guest and a dear friend. We love him so much, and so glad he connected us to you. This has been just an absolute gift, my friend. We just appreciate you.
Where are y'all in San Diego? Pardon me for interrupting. Where are y'all in SoCal?
Coronado Island, right out of San Diego.
You're on Coronado.
Yes.
Okay. I did a summer down in IB and Encinitas.
Great.
Where are y'all going to be the weekend of October 20th?
Should be here.
Yeah. Myself and Kimberly, we're coming out to do the Paul Check podcast again.
Oh,
great.
Yeah.
I'll hit y'all up. We'll get together.
Paul's our homie. He's our He's like our uncle. He's like our dear, dear friend.
Awesome.
Done.
Perfect. We'll have to connect. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us and our listeners. We just appreciate you and your work so much, and really just excited to be connected with another epic human. Thank you, Ryan Sprague.
Last question we ask every guest on the Medicine podcast, as we lean into these quote unquote medicines that are supportive of healing our body, our mind, our relationships, and they may not come in an orange bottle with a white cap, but are nonetheless medicines. What feels like medicine for you currently in your life, Mark?
Fishing.
We've never had that answer.
That's a great answer.
Yeah.
Fishing. And I forgot. I totally forgot. When I was a kid, I used to get so excited about fishing and fishing rods and fishing lures. I would go look at the lures when I wasn't fishing, and like it was this thing, and I totally forgot about that. And I went into a sporting goods store about 3 months ago, and I bought this. I bought myself a fishing rod. This one right here. And they had the same lures for sale. Like when I was a kid, like these little beetle spins. Yeah. This is the rod. And we're on a mile of riverfront. Good smallmouth river. And I got emotional. These little jitterbugs. It took me back to when I was 9. And I got really emotional. And I was like, this is cool. It was like the good feels, the good emotions. And I bought a fishing pole, and I'm going to go fishing this afternoon. And it's just, that's what's medicine for me right now. Because I'm not listening to stories. I'm not talking about words, which I love. And a little bit of not that. Yes, please.
Yeah. Bliss and play.
Peace.
And how those little flirts from your childhood resurface. I love that you're leaning into that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you so much, brother.
All right, you guys, thank you for spending time with us today. Check out the show notes for all of the links, and we will talk to you next time. Go spread some light. Okay, bye.
Thank you so much for listening.
If you enjoyed that, check out right over here for some more fun clips.
Oh, and you're going to want to subscribe.
Bye.